Hello,
Hey,
Kyle.
hey, Dean, how's it going?
Hey, I love your map up there, California. What is that, Nevada next to that, or is that some other state? Michigan?
That's Ohio.
Ohio, and
Close.
California. Love the dog. I got plenty of space for your big dog. I'll have to post on. I try to keep it kind of separate. The channel, but I have a picture of a dog we babysat. We had dogs for years, big dogs. And
Yeah.
when I tell you this is a big dog, he is a big dog. His name was Sawyer, and he was nearly as big as me. So I have a picture. But people were kind of upset about his crate, and I was trying to explain to him that listen, he's happy with that because he likes to know the space. So it looks like it's not a big space for a big dog, but it's actually fine. He loves going in there and
Oh
doing.
yeah, they probably go in their cage. It's open right now, and
Oh,
he's just
yeah,
in there
yeah,
hanging
that's
out.
what I
Like he
say.
just loves it.
And
Yeah.
when you tell him to go kennel, he would, traipse. But I told mom the guy we took a job trucking, and we didn't mind babysitting, but we knew he was probably going to ask us to take the dog. We go, we travel a lot, and it's kind of if you got a responsibility if you're going to have a big dog, so.
Oh, that people don't understand the responsibility. The difference between a big dog and small dog is like you got 10 small dogs compared to one of these. I have two
Yeah,
big dogs.
and they're smart too. I had a goofy big dog, and he was less of a challenge than the dog who was too smart for his own good. So yeah, I mean, but yeah, you're right. I feel bad when people don't do that. I'm one of those persons who never blame the dog. So it's like, hey,
Yeah,
that's on you, right?
yeah.
Okay. Well,
No,
listen, you said as a winner of the 30-minute coaching call that you would like to talk about your exam schedule and time frame. I think is what you said.
yep.
And so let's just get that fired up here. To organize our discussion, kind of came up with some slides to talk about this. So uh, I think you said you're going to be a sales supervisor too.
That's what I'm looking at going towards. I'm going towards the associate director of supervision. So
Okay.
that's
And
what we're
who's
taking
your
the 7 hours
sponsoring
in.
firm? You don't have to tell me anything you don't remember. It's being recorded, so don't compromise any private information. But uh, does the sponsoring firm know that's your path?
Yeah. That's the direction we're going.
I really believe you can do that. So let's kind of talk about reverse engineering a test date for the seven. So most people are 80 to 100 hours, and you can think of that as weeks or hours, however you'd like. And are you a full-time studier or a part-time studier?
I am a part-time, so I'm studying it after work. So I
Okay.
guess like depends on. I mean, the last probably 3 days I've done 3 to 4 hours after work. So
Okay, that's tough. I mean, I get it. That's why I asked. So,
yeah,
what I suggest doing is a study block. So if you said 2 to 3 hours, I would call a study block an hour or 45 minutes or an hour, and I would be committed to that. So if I were your, real accountability partner, and I was sitting down with you, and I'm going to be the one who's, got hiring and firing kind of decisions. I'd say, Kyle, I know you're working, but let's commit to 2 study blocks a night. I would prefer one study block in the morning and one study block in the evening rather than 2 hours at the end of the day, because who knows, you might
yeah.
have some energy vampire that sucks you dry. If you can't do a morning session, evening session, just make sure that you understand your brain power might be dissipating, and maybe do some lower key stuff in that second hour. Just break it up into 2 sessions, and that second hour do something lower key, watch a video or whatever. Now, as an accountability partner, the only thing I can monitor if I was a big brother and had your administrative key is the daily activities through doing practice questions.
Yeah.
So, I would want you to commit in these study blocks to various activities. You'll stay fresher if, let's say, you do 2 study blocks, and let's say I can convince you to do one in the morning for an hour, one in the evening. Now, if we divide that, we could come up with like a time estimate of when we think you should be testing or putting your Series 7. I would say, as a part-time studier, probably 3, 4 weeks out, 3 weeks aggressive,
Yeah.
4 weeks not so aggressive, 5 weeks, whatever makes you feel comfortable. But we do need to get a test date because your brain will focus more when it has a test date. And so, get that test date and know that's your target date. And then your 9 or 10, I highly recommend being aggressive once you're on that roll, because you're going to have some momentum. The people who struggle on 9 or 10, or a lot of times it's been years since they had a 7. And, be honest, once you get your 7, you start doing whatever you're going to do, and you may never do an option again.
Yeah.
So I would be aggressive on that. I would think 9, 10, maybe 4 or 5 weeks out from your.
So I've kind of talked the path, and the hiring director was talking about he wants everything done by Q1.
Oh my God. Wow. And you're full time and part-time studying.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Well, then we got to split the difference, right? So
Yeah.
If you got to get this done by Q1, I would say let's pick 9, 10 in March,
Yeah.
and that puts the 7 in February. What do you want to do? Mid-February, late February?
I was thinking mid-February.
Okay, so there we go. So
Yeah.
now we've got that handled. So that would be the game plan. Give yourself permission to adjust. So what I mean by adjustment is I'm giving you a preliminary estimate. Some people could do more or less. So once you start generating your activities and your study plan and executing, you know, take a strategic pause and say, okay, is this too aggressive, not aggressive enough, where I'm at? Now, a lot of test prep vendors have a study calendar.
Yeah.
And a study calendar is very helpful because it will help self-populate the things, you know, that you need to read and do in terms of activity. So resources, in terms of resources, you know, you have your test prep vendor and you have the book. And so one of the activities you need to do in your study block is allocate time to reading that book, whatever book it is, cover to cover.
So
You
I'm
got
in
to
the Kaplan
allocate
program
time.
now.
Good, good. So
Yeah.
Cap and I had a guy go, how long is it going to take? And I said, well, read for an hour, figure out how many pages you did, see how many pages are there, divide, and that will tell you how many hours it's going to take you to get through that. Don't just read it for, you're not reading it for understanding or taking notes. You just want to see what the whole body of information looks like that you're trying to master between mid-February. So I wouldn't beat yourself up. You're not trying to highlight the book. You know, I had a guy highlight the whole book. And then I said, listen, you might want to buy a different color highlighter and try that again now that you know what's important. But just ones for context. QBank,
Yeah.
if you're using Kaplan, the QBank is 3,200, 3,300 questions. And QBank usage is very, very important. So it's the same deal, division, right? If we want to exhaust the QBank, we need to have a goal for QBank usage. I think you need to at least be in the 80%. There's two things I just can never tell myself telling a test taker is how much of the book should I read? All. How many questions should I do? All. Now, I realize that not all of us live in an ideal world, but you need to give thought to QBank usage. Same thing. How many questions? So if your director or if it's me, I say, you know, how many questions am I going to see each day or each week from you? Practice questions. So you have to build that in there. You can adjust whether you need a free supplement like my channel, Investopedia, you know, Google. Those are all free sources for you. And then you might want to, once you get going, decide whether you want a paid supplement or not. If you think that will quicken your pace, then you might want to consider that, whether it's my friend Brian Lee, the test geek, or whether it's another QBank from some other vendor. But again, I would leave that decision pending. The
Okay.
other thing I highly recommend is printing out the FINRA Series 7 content outline. Are you familiar with that?
Yeah.
I would have that near me every time I'm studying. So
Okay.
if you're trying to decide whether you're going down some rabbit hole or not, you know, take a look at that and say, is that anywhere to be found within those, you know, the context of that outline? You know, sometimes people ask me, well, Dean, how do you know that's not on the test? I said, well, they can't randomly make up things to test people on. They can only test on things that were within the content outline. So
Yeah.
another great thing for you to have.
I was listening to a video the other day. You were talking about the difference between the pre and post SIE and how the difference between what they used to test before and after.
Yeah. It drives me nuts. So it's one of my pet peeves. You know, I can't figure. I'm trying. It's really difficult. You know, I'm whining a little bit to keep the channel organized, and so I don't really have it like a playlist for Dean's rants. You know, so sometimes they find their way into regular video. So my pet peeve is none of the test prep vendors have recognized in terms of how they dice their content the SIE and the 7. And so what used to be 2-3 hour sessions is now the SIE and the 7. It's bifurcated and they've made it, you know, your old school people will probably agree with Dean, but they've made it easier to get human capital into the securities industry. So for example, Kyle, used to be, I'm dating myself, you couldn't take a 9 or a 10 until you had 2 years as a 7. Well, you can see that it hampers our ability to get sales supervisors.
Yeah, I would not be able to.
So they've done that. So you get questions sometimes. I call them old questions about muni bond minutia or stuff that used to be testable. I tell people, hey, nobody's seen that in years. But nobody, and I get it, it's like me on my QBank, right? Nobody wants to say they have less questions. So
Yeah.
nobody ever deletes any questions from the old days. They just leave them in there. I call them legacy questions. And, you know, yeah, but I got to say, every once in a while, I'll tell somebody, nobody's seen it in years. And then somebody will tell me, oh, well, I got that. I go, okay, well, I stand corrected. For example, here's an example. I have a video called Tips, Tricks, and Memory Aids. And every once in a while, I say, oh, you don't have pro golfers, don't miss in there. And I said, well, I don't have pro golfers don't miss or pretty girls date more because nobody's seen it in years. So,
Yeah, yeah,
so that's the kind of thing that's just aggravating. We talked about your study blocks. That sounds like right now you're doing a 2-hour session in the evening. So again, my recommendation is we split that in half, trick yourself, change the channel intellectually, and then maybe your brain will think that's less. So if you're still going to be in the evenings, take like 15 minutes and then rotate 2 things in those study blocks. So we're not going to have one study block of 2 hours. We're going to have 2 study blocks of an hour with a little break to, take a walk, get some oxygen, whatever. And
yeah,
then change activity and change subject area. So what I mean by that is in that first hour you were reading, in the second hour, do some practice questions, or vice versa. Or if you were doing questions, watch a video. The other thing you want to rotate in those study blocks is subject areas. So you don't want to do 2 1-hour blocks of margin, maybe 1 hour on margin and an hour on options. You don't
okay,
want to do 2 hours on options, maybe an hour on options, hour on munis. If you do that, your brain will stay a little fresher. Now, as a part-time studier, we probably should add weekends into the mix here. I mean, if you're a full-time studier, they're giving you time, to study, and you don't have to devote some of your own time. But if we're going to be able to get 2 study blocks a day in, a couple of things, we need to decide how many study blocks on weekends and what is going to be your day off. You got to give yourself a day off to refresh and reset, or you'll get too close and you'll start going backwards. So you need to pick a Friday or Saturday or Sunday, whenever you're going to, do it, right? Reading, watching, and doing. So those are some of the activities, right? Reading, watching videos, doing. And as I said, I highly recommend you rotate both the activity and that subject area. You do that, you'll stay fresher. But as I said, in terms of adjustments, that's the other thing. If I could, if we decide you got to dial it up some more, then maybe we have the 2 blocks in the evening, and then we can get another hour in the morning, perhaps. And maybe you go to your person. You're allowed to use it. Say, hey, I've been participating in these lives. And I spent some time with a tutor, Thursday evening, and we've talked. I'm more than happy to send another Zoom invite, check in on your adjustments. But
yeah,
maybe we
yeah,
have to go tell that person, hey, you need to give me at least a study block during the day where I can go into conference room, and maybe we're going to have to carve out a morning study block if the pace is not mid-February pace.
yeah,
No reason to
perfect,
get worried about that right now, but we need
yeah,
a weekend. We got to kind of figure out what your pace is. Told you about Cubase usage. I'm a stickler for this. So, I would just tell you, some people are different, but you don't want to learn by doing questions. So that's not what we want to do. What we want to do is use questions to do an intellectual inventory. So after each chapter, each activity, we want to take that chapter quiz, that chapter check. Kaplan is awesome on that in terms of the performance tracker and being able to select what kind of a quiz you want to do. If you get 70 plus, I would move on. So I think in your email, you told me you've done unit 1, 2, and 3.
yeah.
Have you done any of those questions yet?
But yeah, I've done a lot of those
Good.
questions, and I'm right around. I tried it once. I hit a couple of exams at the 70%. That's when I kind of moved on to
I
the
love
next
it.
one.
That's exactly what's going to be my recommendation. So
Yeah,
we're going to keep matriculating down the field towards mid-February, right? And
yep,
then once you get all those units done, then we want to start doing practice tests. And I want to, have a commitment. I would want to have a commitment of, are you going to do in that last week? Are you going to do 3 of them? Are you going to do 4 of them? How many are you going to do? And again, not to learn, just to see where we're at, because if we're in that 70% range, we should feel very good about your success. If you're below 60, so below 70, between 60 and 70, you're at risk. So who knows if I'm ever going to get to go on campus and do classes again. But this was a class with 20 people on campus, and they have a real accountability partner. And we're talking Friday, they're testing Monday, 20 of them. And backstage, because, we can see their practice exams and their master exams. And I said, okay, let's start with the good news. We have 12 people who just did the master exam and got over 70. I think those are all fine. I don't think we're gonna have any problems with those folks.
yeah,
We have 8. So there's 12. We have 8 that we need to talk about. 6 of them got between 60 and 70. That means they're at risk, but if over the weekend they don't get wobbly and they stay dedicated, disciplined, and organized, I think they're going to pass. All of them did. So proud of them. So that
awesome.
means they're at
Yeah,
risk. I had a guy Friday testing Monday. He was a guy who's tutoring, and we did a practice exam together, and it was one that has very strong correlation to the actual exam. He got a 67. I said, had that been the real test, you would have failed. But good news, this is Friday and you're testing Monday. So all we need to do is find a few points over the weekend. I think we can do it. And good news, he didn't get wobbly, he passed.
yep,
Now, 2 of those 20 people had below 60. That is really tough because that just means they're trying to lay base and do questions. And we lost both of them. I'm so proud of them. They kept working. They got a high 60, which is one of the disappointing scores. But they both, retested and made it. In our discussion, I've had people get as low as a 58 and still pass, but that's certainly not where we want to be. We want to routinely be in that 70 plus range. So,
Yeah. Yep.
so as I told you, I would want a commitment from you as an accountability partner. Practice tests, how many are you going to do, how often, and when are you going to do the last one? So again, based on your confidence level and your performance. So let's say you're testing mid-February and let's say you're testing on a Friday. Then we think Wednesday, Kyle, how you feeling? If you're really confident, we want to be more aggressive and maybe taking another practice final, but you got to kind of wind this thing down Thursday, right? Because if we've got Friday test day, because you can't wear yourself out.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of, time to just do low key stuff, reviewing your notes. If you're really aggressive, want to take a practice final Thursday morning and you're scoring well and you have confidence, I'm not opposed to it. But we want to kind of figure out, when's the last one going to be? When is my last mark? I call it mark to market, right? When's the last time I'm taking a mark? And then this is what I got, and this is what I'm going down there with, right? So
Yeah.
I would like to see if it's you're testing Friday, I'd like to see at least 3 practice exams starting, Saturday, the week of the test, at
Okay.
least 3. So, if you could do more, that's great. I mean, more than one a day is not good. And you don't want to do one every day, I think is a little much because again, you don't want to wear yourself out. You want to do one again, not to learn, just to kind of inventory, see what you can review. I call it remediation. See what remediation is necessary, right? When you're going
Okay.
land, maybe no remediation is necessary, right?
Yeah. Okay. So you said 3 or 4, like kind of the week before, like you would want to see that.
Yeah. I would, if I don't know how proactive your firm is, if you do you have a training department or trainers?
We do not right now. Right now,
Okay.
this is kind of almost.
Okay. So, that's why I'm so you're kind of your own accountability partner, it sounds like.
Yeah.
So, if I were your person who's invested in you getting this all done in Q1, maybe we make him or her your accountability partner and say, hey, listen, I know you have some expectations here, and it's good to sit down and talk about the practice exam and how you did.
Yeah.
Again, this is not a transaction, it's a relationship. As a winner of the coaching call, if you can't get that person to do that for you, I'm more than happy. You don't need to book tutoring for that. If you just need to check in and talk about your performance and talk about, is this something I need to worry about? Or I just had a guy pass today. I'm so happy when people listen to me. And he said, Dean, I didn't spend any time on the margin other than what you told me. I had one margin question, I passed. I go, man, somebody who listens, right? So that's part of that debrief. Now, maybe your person isn't as capable as I would perhaps be in telling you what to worry about or not. But even just you talking out loud about it or bring it to the Tuesday live stream. Tell us what our score is in the chat. Again, remember, you guard your privacy in the chat because, who knows, just share what you want to share. Don't, share anything else. But if you want to put it out there and tell us, then I'm more than happy to, do it in that format as well. But that's what you're kind of doing as you come down that back 9. You're going to be doing practice tests and then remediation based on the practice test. And who knows, it might be smooth sailing, right? If you get like I sometimes tell people what you're doing is working, you're not at risk, and rinse and repeat. That might be, it might be very possible that there's no remediation necessary. I mean, so far, it sounds like you're on a good footing. You said you got 3 units done. You've done your practice questions. You're getting over 70. You're moving on. And so, who knows, maybe we say, well, gee, you don't need any more help.
Yeah, I don't know. Those first ones were kind of easy. I'm now into the equations now, so that's where we're getting into more.
Well, and the math, so the 3 styles of questions you get are recognition, practical application, and judgment. And you can't be giving up recognition like T+1, for example.
Yeah.
11:59 p.m. Eastern time, for example. And even if you don't like math, I don't like math, but even if you don't like math, you've got to embrace practical application questions because there is no interpretation of what the current yield is, for example.
Yeah, that's what I was doing a couple of those the other day. Yeah, that's exactly. They were like,
so you want to save your questions for what I call judgment questions, where you just really can't memorize them. Like a lot of suitability questions are judgment questions where you go, I get it down to a 50-50. I go, oh man, I don't know. This guy's what, 40 years old. And I'm trying to figure out what the scenario is. About 10% of your exam is going to be judgment questions. Now, Kyle, I got some good news and some bad news. Your 10 is almost, and 9 and 10 are almost all of that. Because I joke with you on your 7, Kyle, you have a great answer available to you called check with your immediate supervisor. And you know, if I'm chopping my answer set, it says check with my immediate supervisor. I go, wow, I like that a lot, right? That's your 9, your 10. I joke, I would 9 10s when I teach 9 10s and 24s. I say, you're really babysitting baby brokers or, you know, existing brokers, you know, tenured brokers.
Yeah.
But a lot of judgment questions, and people just get really aggravated because they'll say, oh, Dean, STC says it this way and Kaplan says it that way. And I said, well, they look like they're the same questions, but they're not. They're different answer sets with different judgment based on that answer set. So, you know, this is not the NBA game. It's the NBA finals, for example. You know, there's more, you know, issues with taking somebody to the finals and, you know, taking them to the regular season game for perhaps. So all the work, let me just say that too, all the work you did on your SIE is now going to pay dividends on your 7.
Nice.
And I can't stress this enough to you. You actually want to be given thought in executing your 7 study plan, knowing you're taking a 9 or 10. So that means, you know, you want to do more than just pass this 7, because if we're going to be an aggressive Q1 to do your 9 10 in March, you want to have as much base as possible laid on that 7, because where the people 9 and 10 struggle, sometimes it's been years since they actually, you know, did any of this stuff. Because, you know, I always joke, when you get your 7, you pass, you went back to your manager and said, I know I have a series 7, but is it okay if I just sell mutual funds? Most managers would say, well, that would be terrific. Right. So they could get in that mode of just doing mutual funds perhaps, and then, you know, they don't know any of this other stuff. So, you know, you got to be a little careful about that. If I joke, if you want to terrify your supervisor, come back and say, man, I just love this option stuff and margin and discretion, oil and gas, wildcat programs. You know, now really scare them. All right. So let's just talk about what we decided from tonight's call. We want you to get your test date. Feel free, Kyle, to send me an email with that test date. I have little sticky pads here. I'll just show you. Let me see if I can change my camera here. And what I'll do when I get that from you, just so you know, my mom calls it her prayer box. I'm not going to go as far as calling this my prayer box. But
I like the sound.
So there you can see. So here's my little postie pad, and I put your name there with your test date, and I make little notes about what we've discussed, which I'll do as soon as we're done with the call. And so you are, you know, like I say, welcome to send that. I mean, again, I'm not
Awesome. I will.
if you don't have to do anything that you don't want to do, obviously, but I just want you to be rest assured that we'll make sure. I'll put down my notes for you. Same thing. Our target date for the 9-10. So we're going to get a mid-February Series 7 test date, a late March 9-10 test date. What are you going to do there first? Let's talk about that. So, do you have any thoughts on the 9 or the 10 first?
So I have just generally looked at them, and I know the 10 is what, I think almost like 3 times.
It's a slog.
Yeah,
It's a slog. That's why I asked. I would recommend the 9 first.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I agree.
So I'd knock out that 9, and you know, let's talk before, you know, after your first victory. Well, this will be your second victory, right? Because you got your SIE. So after your second testing victory,
Yeah, I got the SIE 6 and 63.
Oh my goodness, you had 3 testing victories. So you're not your first rodeo. That's great. Okay, so on the 9, I think you could almost pass out of that if you really work hard on your options component of your 7. I mean, there's some minutia on the 9 that is not in the 7, but it's not enough. So I would be really aggressive on that one. I mean, maybe if you do mid-February, maybe you do that one early March, you could knock that out pretty quick.
Yeah.
So the biggest, you know, dragon out there to be slayed is that 10. That's a serious kind of looking dragon. So, you know, we'll put that 10 late March, and then that will give you, you know, at least a couple of weeks. If we can knock out the 9 like early March, give you 2-3 weeks to get that 10 done. We talked about your resources. We talked about study blocks, how many a day. We talked about all your activities. We talked about reading the book, making a time estimate. We talked about QBank out usage. We talked about practice tests, how many you're going to do, how often. And then we said, well, you're going to pick a date where it's going to be your last practice date. Again, if you answer these questions for me in the email, I'll add in my little sticky pad, and I'll be able to kind of, in my own mind, you know, track your progress a little bit and see, you know, where you're at matriculating towards this mid-February. Anything else you'd like to know about your schedule, study schedule and time frame? That was the original thing you wanted to talk about.
I think that was all very, very helpful. I mean, the only thing that kind of pushes me away, I mean, I'm going to do it because you've said it 2 or 3 times now, is read the book back to back because I have always found that practice problems help me learn the best, and that sometimes I find myself skimming the book and not really retaining
Well,
information.
here's what I would say, Carl. I always say that all of my recommendations is a buffet.
Yeah.
Take
Okay.
what you like, leave what you don't. And you are a 3-time victorious test taker. So that being said, what's working for you, there's no reason for you not to do something that if you're comfortable with what you're doing, it's been working, there's no sense to make a major intervention in that. Now, if you were not, with the successful test takers, I had a person I had to say, well, how's that working for you? You know, she was telling me I have my own way of doing options. I go, well, that's wonderful. It's a buffet if you get the right answers, but you're not. So do what you're comfortable with. If you're getting
Yeah.
the 70%, you want to take it. I always say inch by inch. So if you want to take it unit by unit, and that's working for you. And it sounds like I joke the difference in tragedy and comedy is timing. So I always joke every tragedy, if they're just in Act 6, Scene 1, everybody on the stage would still be alive. So in terms of your timeline, you also got to kind of decide where that might be a good idea for you because you have a aggressive time uh, pressure. I mean, the time is squeezed into this
Yeah.
first quarter, and it's also squeezed into sounds like your existing responsibilities.
Yeah.
So that means maybe we don't have time to execute the ideal study plan, right? I
Yeah.
always
Yeah.
joke I'm not very sympathetic sometimes because there are some men and women. It doesn't sound like you, Kyle, but there are some men and women who are getting 4 months with pay, and all they're supposed to do is study and pass their exams. And so when they
I
stop,
need that.
when they whine, I'm like, oh my goodness, you don't know how blessed you are. There's a lot of people that aren't getting 4 months with pay,
Yeah.
to matriculate through the exam. So like I say, feel free to amend, or I told you adjustments. Adjust what Dean has recommended to you with what works for you, and just make sure the units things too, right? You're matriculating, so we got to kind of give an eye on how long it took you to do 3 units and what the next three, just to make sure that by the time it's done, right, that when that timeline in mid-February is done, that last week, you're done with the book and you're done with those practice questions. So
Yeah.
that's the other reverse engineering, right? We're going to get the test date, and then we're going to also reverse engineer Saturday. I'm using Friday just as a placeholder, but let's say it's Friday. We want to be done with all the preliminary stuff on Saturday, so that now we can turn to on practice finals, doing intellectual inventories, doing remediation. That's no longer a time for, we might circle back and watch a video or read a chapter, but that's really not what we're going to be doing towards that as we get closer to that test date. So you want to build
Okay.
that into it, to your timeline as well, right? That
Okay.
final week before is going to be there. And then again, whoever it is that is your person at the firm, you just got to also be aggressive. And I always tell people, you can tell people, hey, I'm emotionally fragile right now. I'm studying for my exams. Just give yourself permission to kind of block people out who might not be helpful
Yeah.
to what you're
Yeah.
doing. So that's the other thing I don't like about those exclusively evening study plans, because who knows what might happen during the day. So if we had one in the morning, that's going to be very difficult for somebody to disrupt you
Yeah.
in the morning. But my brother, and again, it's a buffet. My brother, it would be terrible for him. He doesn't even get mentally going till like noon. So the idea that he's going to wake up and do something at 9 a.m. is just, it's not his circadian rhythm. So you want to fit it into your circadian rhythm. So if your circadian rhythm, like my brother's a night owl,
Yeah.
that's fine too. All right. Anything else on your list?
I think that's it. I think it was some great information.
Cool.
Just continue going, and then yeah, I'll send you an email. We'll kind of get an idea of once February comes, and then moving on to the other monsters that we have to
Yeah,
take.
and like I say, in these coaching calls, we do the drawing and you won. But I want everybody to know, when I told Jessica the same thing. It's just not a one-off. Once you're in the coaching call, and you have my permission to make sure that you stay in touch and let me know what's going on. If we need to hop on a Zoom and just chat about a particular question, or just feel free to let me know, and I'll send you the Zoom invite, and we can check in, because we want to kind of know what happens to you and keep you on track. If you don't need that, like I say again, not stalking you, but if you need it, it's here. If you don't, and then the Hippocratic Oath is first, I do hopefully do no harm. So we're talking early, so that's good, because I had a guy
Yeah.
call me on a Sunday night, and he's taking his 9, he boat tutoring on a Sunday night, testing Monday. I go, listen, my friend, I don't know what you think we can do tonight, so, reach out sooner rather than later is, guess what I would say.
Yeah, perfect. Will
Okay,
do.
my
I will
friend.
keep in. Thank you
Hope
so
to see
much,
you
Dean.
Tuesday on the live stream, and if not, you know where to find me.
Yes, I do. Thank you so
Okay.
much.
All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye.